Hello my dear students. Today we are going to see everything about the heart. Okay, the functioning of the heart, the blood vessels, the chambers, all the things related to heart. Okay, we are going through the lesson of circulatory system. Yeah, the last session we completed about the blood groups, and then also a small introduction about heart I gave you. That heart, it's not situated on the left side, but we can say that this pointed end of the heart is towards the left and it beats, its contraction is powerful. So we say that heart is situated on the left side. Then we studied that there are four chambers of the heart. Okay, there are four different chambers of the heart. So we can say that first is the right auricle, the right ventricle. So here you can see the right atrium. Okay, you can see here this is the right atrium, this is the right ventricle, then this is the left atrium, and this is the left ventricle. So these are the four chambers of the heart. Okay, as well as heart is covered with membranous covering called the pericardium, and the left and the right side of the heart is separated with a septum. Okay, then here the auricles which are there, which are also called as the atrium. The atrium is, we can say that they have thinner muscular walls. Now why do the atrium or the auricles have thinner muscular wall? Is because they just have to pump the blood to the ventricles. Then ventricles which are there, they have thick muscular walls. Why do they have the thick muscular walls? Because they have to pump the blood, everywhere. They have to pump it to the farthest point, that means up to the head or the toes, or also up to the brain, which is against the gravity. That's why the we can say that the ventricles which are there, they have thicker muscular walls. Now first point, let us see the blood vessels which are entering and leaving the heart. So blood vessels which are entering and leaving the heart, out of that first is, let us see the right atrium here. Okay, now the right atrium which is there, it will be receiving the blood from two different parts. Okay, that is the superior vena cava, or called the anterior vena cava, or inferior vena cava, also we can call it as inferior vena cava, or it is called as a posterior vena cava. So superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, or anterior vena cava and posterior vena cava. Now anterior vena cava which is there, it will be bringing all the deoxygenated blood. Okay, it will be bringing all the deoxygenated blood from the anterior regions. Anterior regions means the upper regions, such as the chest, the head, the arms. So here the superior vena cava will be bringing all the deoxygenated blood where, into the right atrium. Okay, and it will be bringing all the deoxygenated blood from the head, arms and chest. Then the inferior vena cava or the posterior vena cava. Posterior vena cava will be bringing the blood from the posterior or the lower region, such as the abdomen and legs. Okay, this inferior vena cava will be bringing the blood from the lower or the posterior or the inferior, we can call it as region, including the abdomen and the legs. Okay, so right atrium receiving the deoxygenated blood from superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, or anterior vena cava, posterior vena cava. Anterior vena cava is also called as precaval. Okay, then the left atrium which is there, it brings the blood from the posterior, left atrium will be receiving four pulmonary veins, two from each lungs. Okay, so here you can see that there are two pulmonary veins. You can see here the left pulmonary, and the left pulmonary vein is over here, right? So here we'll be getting the left pulmonary vein. So left atrium receives four pulmonary veins, two from each lungs. Okay, so this is where the left atrium will be there. So you can see these two, okay, over here, and these two, which is 4. So what are these doing? They are bringing the oxygenated blood, right pulmonary veins 2 and left pulmonary veins 2. So total 4 pulmonary veins. Then now the blood vessels which are leaving from the heart. I hope these two things are clear. The blood is the deoxygenated blood is coming in the right atrium from the posterior, the anterior and the posterior vena cava, or superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Now the blood vessels which are leaving from the heart. Okay, so arising from the ventricles, there are two large blood vessels which are leaving the heart. Okay, now here there is pulmonary artery which is there. Okay, pulmonary artery arises from the right ventricle. So pulmonary artery will be arising from the right ventricle. So if you can see here, there is a right pulmonary artery over here. You can see that, right? So pulmonary artery, what is pulmonary artery doing? Pulmonary artery arises from the right ventricle, and this will be carrying the deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation, right? What will the pulmonary artery do? Pulmonary artery will be carrying the deoxygenated blood from the deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation. Pulmonary artery will be carrying the deoxygenated blood to the lungs for the oxygenation. Then second one we have is the aorta. This is the aortic arch, this is the aorta, descending aorta, and this is the aorta over here. Aorta will be arising from the left ventricle. Okay, pulmonary artery from the right, aorta from the left. And what will the aorta do? It will also be carrying the oxygenated blood to all the parts of the body. Okay, aorta will also be carrying the blood to all the parts of the body. I hope this is clear. Blood vessels leaving from the heart, that is from the right ventricle, pulmonary artery, from the right ventricle, left ventricle, aorta. So these are the two blood vessels leaving the heart. Then we have something called as the coronary arteries. Okay, coronary arteries, you can see two coronary arteries from the left and the right base at the left of the aorta. So here you can see that there is a right coronary artery, and here there is a left coronary artery. Okay, here left coronary artery, and here you can see the right coronary artery. So these are the coronary arteries. Now what is the function of these coronary arteries which are there? They are arising from the base of the aorta, and these supply blood to the heart muscles. So they are supplying the blood to the heart muscles. Okay, then whenever there is a blockage, if there is any particular blockage in the coronary artery, in any one or more of their branches, there is a deadening of the corresponding areas of the heart. So if there is, these are the coronary arteries are supplying blood to the they are supplying blood to the heart vessels of the heart, the muscles of the heart. So if there is any blockage, there can be a deadening. That means that area will become dead. It will become, no blood supply will be there. It will become numb, and this the corresponding area of the heart, and then the muscles will be leading to myocardial infarction. Okay, myocardial infarction, or it's in a simple way called as a heart attack. Okay, the coronary veins which are there, they will be collecting the blood from the heart walls, and they will be pouring it into the right auricle. Okay, coronary artery, what is it doing? It is giving blood to the to any one of the giving blood to the heart muscles. And coronary veins, what are they doing? They are collecting the blood from the heart walls and pouring it into the right auricle. Okay, why pouring it into the right auricle? For the purification. So angina pectoris is the chest pain due to the insufficient blood supply of the heart muscle. So this angina pectoris, if you get a chest pain, then that's because of the insufficient supply of the blood to the heart muscle. Okay, so till now I told you that there are different four chambers of the heart. Then we discussed which are the blood vessels entering and leaving the heart, right? Okay, then we studied what are coronary arteries, and now we are going to see heart as a bank cashier. What is the bank cashier doing? It is handling so much of money every day. Okay, but what he can use for himself is only the salary. Can he use the money which the people are giving to him? No. It's not similar. Is it not similar to the heart also? Heart is also handling so much of blood every minute, but it uses much which it gets through the coronary arteries, supplying it to the muscular walls. So this is how heart is behaving like a bank cashier. Now there are different valves for the regulation of the flow of blood. Okay, now if the blood is flowing inside, we need some valves. Now what are these valves are? As we have water valves to regulate the closing and the to start the water and stop the water flowing, we have valves. We have particular valves. Similarly, heart also has certain kind of valves to stop and regulate the flow of blood. So there are four different valves which are present in the heart. Okay, so first is the right atrioventricular valve, which is also located at the aperture between right auricle and right ventricle. So this is called as a tricuspid valve, which has three flaps. So here you can see, in this figure we can see it very carefully. Here you can see that this is the right ventricle, this is the right atrium. Okay, right atrium, right ventricle. So the blood which has to flow from here, it flows through this tricuspid valve here. The tricuspid valve which is there, it has three flaps. Okay, three flaps. And it is held, the apexis or the apices of it is held with a, we can say that with a cord which is called as tendinous cords, which are called as chordae tendinae. Okay, and then this are also arising from the muscular projections called the papillary muscles. So here the right atrium and the right ventricle, between the right atrium and the right ventricle, okay, there is a tricuspid valve which helps in the, or we can say that which regulates the flow of the blood. This particular tricuspid valve, okay, it is held in position with the tendinous cords, or we call it as chordae tendinae, which are arising from the muscular projections of the ventricle, which are known as the papillary muscles. Okay, then the second one which is there, so this is the tricuspid valve. Now you observe the left atrium and the left ventricle. Between the left atrium and the left ventricle, there is one more valve which is called the bicuspid valve, which has, or the mitral valve, which has two flaps or two cusps, two separation. Okay, two cusps like this. Now here, this is the mitral valve which separates the, which is separating the left atrium and the left ventricle. Then afterwards we have something called as the pulmonary semilunar valve. So you can see here, this is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Pulmonary semilunar valve, where is it located? It is also located at the opening of the right atrium. Okay, it's located at the opening of the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. So here you can see that this is the right ventricle which is there. Okay, and near the right ventricle, at the opening, at the pulmonary artery's opening only, this particular semilunar valve is located. This semilunar valve is called as pulmonary semilunar valve, and these are also pocket shaped and 3 in number. Then the second one, which semilunar valve, is the semilunar valves of the aorta. Okay, here you can see that valve is present here somewhere, semilunar valves of aorta. Now where is this located? It is located where the aorta begins, at the origin of the aorta. Okay, and also from the left ventricle, and this is also 3 in number and pocket shaped. So different valves of the heart, how many valves did we study? 4. First, the tricuspid valve, okay, which has 3 cusps. Okay, it is held by the tendinous cords called the chordae tendinae, and that is held by the papillary muscles. Then we have the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve, which is between the right atrium, the left atrium and the left ventricle. Then at the right ventricle and the pulmonary vein, we have the opening which is called the semilunar valve. Okay, and then we have the aortic valve or the aortic semilunar valve located at the origin of the aorta. So this is this is how different valves are present in the heart and the different blood vessels. So here just a small little diagram I have drawn, so that it becomes easy for you to understand what exactly it's the, how the heart looks. So here I have drawn 4 chambers of the heart. Okay, you can see that. Okay, first is the right atrium. You can see the right atrium here, left atrium here, right ventricle here, left ventricle here. Okay, so this is there. So now you see here the right atrium which is there, it will be getting which kind of blood? Deoxygenated blood. So who will give the deoxygenated blood to it? It will be getting it from the anterior vena cava and the posterior vena cava, or we call it as superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. So the deoxygenated blood has entered the right atrium. Now what the right atrium will do? It will be pumping the blood. So where will it pump the blood? It will pump the blood into the right ventricle. How will it pump the blood into the right ventricle? With the help of this tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve will open up. Okay, and then once the tricuspid valve open up, the blood will enter the right ventricle. Now the blood has entered the right ventricle. Okay, now it will be going through the pulmonary artery. From the pulmonary artery, where will it go? It will go to the lungs. The deoxygenated blood will be going to the lungs for what? For oxygenation, right? This between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, which type of valve was present? Semilunar valve. And what is that semilunar valve called as? Pulmonary semilunar valve. This is what I have written here. Okay, so here semilunar valve which is there. Fine. Then we have the left auricle or left atrium will be also sending the blood to the left ventricle by the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. Then aorta, which is present over here, aorta, what it will do? It will be sending the oxygenated blood. So before that, the pulmonary vein, which is here, I forgot to write, the pulmonary vein will be entering here. Okay, this pulmonary vein will be there, it will be bringing oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood will enter the left atrium and it will be entering the left ventricle. Left ventricle, between left atrium, left ventricle, which valve is there? Mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. Here from the aortic valve it will go to the aorta and oxygenated blood will be going to various parts of the body. So this is how the whole functioning of the heart takes place. So here you can see I have written the blood vessels also, which we studied, which are the blood vessels entering the heart: posterior, anterior, and the next which we studied was the pulmonary artery. Then leaving the heart we saw the different blood vessels which were there, which were leaving the heart. They were the the leaving the heart were pulmonary artery and the aorta. Entering the heart were the posterior and inferior vena cava. And then the four valves you saw: the tricuspid, the mitral valve, the pulmonary valve, the aortic valve. You can see where they are originating also. Then afterwards how the blood is taken. So deoxygenated blood entering here, going to the right ventricle from the tricuspid valve. From here deoxygenated blood went to the lungs for purification. Pulmonary vein bringing it for oxygenated blood into the left atrium. Left atrium sending to the left ventricle by the mitral or the bicuspid valve. Again from the aorta it is going to, the oxygenated blood is going to the various parts of the body. So this is how the functioning of the heart takes place. Okay, now before we go ahead, before we go to the circulation of the blood, you first need to understand the two main phases of the heart, which is called as the part A, which is the atrial systole, and part B, which is the ventricular systole. Now here the atrial systole and the ventricle systole, how does it take place? Now here you can see some numbers are there, 1 2 3 4, and some structures are there. This is the pulmonary artery, aorta, vena cava, that is the vena cava, tricuspid. So we will just see. Now in atrial systole what happens is the auricular muscles contract. So here when the auricular muscles contract, what happens? When the auricular muscles contract, the openings of the vena cava and the pulmonary vein close, right? So these two openings will close. Why? Because now the blood from the auricles, it is entering to the ventricles. So these two will be closed. How? Why these two will be closed? Because vena cava are bringing which type of blood? Deoxygenated blood. But pulmonary vein is bringing which type of blood? Oxygenated blood. Here they are going to the right region, right? And the left region, what is happening? Oxygenated blood. But the right region is having which type of blood? Deoxygenated blood. So blood has entered here from the vena cava and the pulmonary. Now these two flaps are closed, right? The vena cava are closed and the pulmonary vein is closed. Now the blood which is there, it enters the ventricles. Now from the auricles the blood is entering the ventricles. So from it will be entering from the valves 1 and 2. Tricuspid valve is 1, bicuspid valve is 2. As soon as the blood enters the enters the this is the, of course this is entering here, that means the right ventricle, and the here it's the left ventricle. So as soon as here both the side it enters, a lub sound, okay, a dub sound is produced in the semilunar valves at the roots of pulmonary artery and aorta. So here 3 and 4, can you see? Semilunar, pulmonary artery and the aorta, they close with a sound which is called as dub. These two valves are closed with a sound dub. As soon as the blood enters from 1 and 2, from the tricuspid valve, from the bicuspid valve, the semilunar valves of the pulmonary artery and the aorta close with a sound of dub. Okay, so see, first these two vena cava and pulmonary vein are closed. Blood will be entering from the auricles through the ventricles from these two valves, and at that moment 3 and 4 will be closed. 3 and 4 are nothing but pulmonary semilunar valve, aortic semilunar valve. That's called as the atrial systole. So the sound is produced dub. This sound dub is produced, why? So that the blood does not go back into the ventricles. Okay, so that the blood is not going back into the ventricles. Then the ventricular systole, what happens here? In the ventricular systole, or we call the and the atrial diastole, what happens here? Ventricular muscles will contract. Ventricular muscles contract, so what happens? Bicuspid valve and tricuspid valve are now closed. Why? Because from the ventricles, where will the blood go? From the right ventricle, it will be going where? From the right ventricle, it will be going to the pulmonary artery, and from the left ventricle, where it will be going to the aorta. So that time 1 and 2, that is the bicuspid and the tricuspid and the bicuspid, both these valves close. So when these two valves close, that sound is produced is called lub. Okay, that is called as the lub sound. So here you can see blood passes into the aorta and pulmonary artery through semilunar valves 3 and 4. So now the blood will be going upwards. Can you see here? 3 pulmonary artery, 4 aorta, they will be going upwards. From here oxygenated blood, from here from here deoxygenated blood, from here oxygenated blood, and here atria will be drawing now more blood. Now auricle will again open. What will be opening? It will open the vena cava and the pulmonary veins so that blood can enter into it. Okay, and the chordae tendineae holds the valves in position, preventing the, so these the tendinae which we studied, the muscles which are there, they close up and they will be closing it till the so that due to pressure which is exerted by contracting ventricles. So here understand, now this whole process is taking place simultaneously in different movements, right? How 3 and 4 open, 3 and 4 closes with lub sound, from 1 and 2 blood is entering. Then in the second one, that is in the ventricular systole, what is happening? 3 and 4 are open, 1 and 2 are closing. So this is called as the atrial systole and the ventricular systole. Okay, so this is how it takes place, how the opening and all these things are taking place. Now circulation of the blood in the heart, as well as all the heartbeat, the pacemaker, all these things we will be covering it in the next lecture. Now I hope that you are clear about everything. I explained you the structure of the heart, the different blood vessels of the heart which are there, which are the entering blood vessels, which are the outgoing blood vessels. Then I explained you the 4 chambers. Then we studied the different 4 valves in the heart, and what is systole and diastole, which is there, which is also explained in this heartbeat thing. You can see that this also we will be heart sounds and heartbeat also we will be seeing it next time in more details. I hope everything is very clear. Thank you children. Do take care of yourself.